Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first session of the our brand new events, Meet Your Uni, which are organized by the EARC, by the Independent Architecture Research Colloquia. So for those of you who are not familiar for what EARC is, this is the colloquia of the faculty of the university, which is composed and managed by the PhD candidates of the faculty. And a year ago or something like that, we have the idea to somehow start crossing the different profiles that the university had and try to create how should I say it? A culture of contamination in between the different profiles and individuals that the university had, and we prepared everything already for, or we started a year ago with idea developing, etc., and we were ready to kick off actually for last semester, and for obvious reasons, everything needs to be canceled. And again, this year we decided, or this semester we decided to recover the work that has already done, and simply let it happen. So this is our first session. We will have 3 along this year, and the purpose of this session is, as I said, bring the individual profiles, not necessarily the institute profiles, but the people who are working on it, and also in order to engage to a larger degree anyone that composes the faculty, from students, from Mittelbau, or teaching staff, and professors. So this semester it's Florina Pop, who is also there, and myself, the one who are somehow curating or managing these events, and because we wanted somehow to play safe for the first time, we somehow keep it from our immediate circle, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be like this for the future events or semesters. And actually, our idea is also engage students from bachelor and masters in the talk. Probably in the form of we will make for the next semester or the forthcoming one. Let's see how we can handle this. Some kind of open calls in order to curate or to bring different positions in these events. So that's been said. The format that we have here, it's we are not interested in, let's say, in frontal lectures. So we would like more to create a familiar environment where we can enhance conversation and talks instead of just the one opinion. And so we decided to invite it always 2 different positions, which are framed around a topic. Tonight is art and architecture and practice. And we will have another 2, which if I move myself, I don't know if you can see it. Yes. That will be technology and practice, and the last one will be theory and history. And so each of the teams will present like around 20 minutes, and then we will open on discussions that will be moderated this time by Florina and me. And then we will collect also in the chat for the Q&A session afterwards. If someone wants to ask something or wants to participate, for sure we'll have the opportunity at the end of the event. So I think I forget nothing for outlining the event. If yes, tell me, Florina, and if not, you can already introduce tonight's speakers.
Thanks, Gonzalo. Yeah, I have the pleasure to introduce four amazing guests, tonight's speaker, and I'll just take the order on the poster. Let's start with Guzelis, who's an Innsbruck-based architect and a new media artist who graduated from the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. He's currently a PhD student and an assistant at Studio 3. He worked in computer-aided manufacturing at the platform for analog and digital production at the University of Fine Arts in Vienna. And in 2016, he joined the architecture practice LAC in Innsbruck and worked on their architectural film project Coexistence for the Montenegro Pavilion at the 15th Venice Biennale of Architecture. His short films were screened and awarded at various festivals in Europe and the USA, and in 2017, his short, The Aleph, received the Best Short Animation Award at the 45th Boston Sci-Fi Film Festival. Uwe Brunner is an architect and researcher who studied in Vienna, Amsterdam, and received his master's degree at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. His work has been exhibited and screened in multiple locations, including the Museum for Applied Arts in Vienna, the SciArc in Los Angeles, Animation Nights in New York. Between 2017 and 2018, he was working in New York with Mark Foster Gage, and since 2019, he is a faculty member and PhD student at Studio 3. Our second team is formerly not known, composed of Simeon Brugger and Zeynep Cinar. They are a multidisciplinary design and architectural research collaborative. Zeynep Cinar is an assistant professor and PhD candidate at the Institute of Urban Design at our university. She received her bachelor in architecture at the University in Istanbul and then moved to Los Angeles to study at SciArc, where she got her master's with a merit award for her graduate thesis. Zeynep has worked as an architect and designer in Istanbul, Los Angeles, and in Innsbruck. And Simeon is also an assistant professor and PhD candidate at the Urban Design Institute of our university. He did study at SciArc in Los Angeles and the University of Innsbruck, where he received his master's degree. He worked as an architect and a designer in Helsinki, Los Angeles, and in architecture practices within Austria. And Simeon is also the director of a contemporary art gallery in Innsbruck, Galerie Wiedauer, located in the city center. And there he curates exhibitions and works with artists to realize their projects. And he does this since 2011. And both Simeon and Zeynep, as co-founders of formerly not known Press, they're working on various publication projects in the fields of art and architecture. Thank you so much, the four of you. And we will keep the order on the poster, so I will give the word to Cenk to start.
Yeah, maybe I'm taking over.
Sorry.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah, thank you so much for hosting us tonight. And of course, thank you so much, Gonzalo and Florina, for putting time and effort in that format and to get it going. And I think it's a very important format to really get a glimpse into what people are doing at the institutes and the whole faculty, and really cultivate a kind of platform for discussions, which is super nice. So thank you for that. So, and also thank you for the introduction, of course. So, Cenk, maybe Are you sharing the screen already?
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, okay. Okay, so in our research at the Studio 3, me and Cenk, and in our individual PhD topics, we are confronting ourselves with the question of the architectural relevance integration of virtual environments. So thus we are not seeing the virtual space as a space that is subordinate to the physical space, but rather as a equal entity to the physical space. So in our teaching and practice, we are testing out what forms and shapes, in contrast to the physical built environment, architecture could take on in the virtual space. So, I mean, you will see also throughout the whole short talk here that we are very much concerned with the virtual space. So what kind of forms can take architecture on in the virtual space? Or maybe let's put it another way, what's the architectural value in the virtual space? And what's the role of an architect in creating virtual environment and virtual worlds? So as we are designers and architects venture into the virtual realm, we have the first time the power to design space itself. Yeah. So what I mean with that is that we are not designing in space anymore so much, but we are really designing, or we are able to design physics. We are able to design different visions. We can design body movements. We can design and inhabit non-Cartesian space and so on. So the possibilities and potentialities are endless. But of course, this new kind of freedoms also bring a new set of constraints and affordances depending on the platform we are using. So what we are interested in, to kind of put it in a nutshell, is the space of software and what kind of different spaces this space of software enables. And what kind of spaces enables for us to inhabit and perceive in real time. So in our short talk tonight, we give you a little bit of insight what we like, what we are doing, what we are researching, what we are teaching at the Studio 3 Institute for Experimental Architecture. And I pass it over to Cenk.
Okay, I'll take over from here. So the next minutes, I'll be talking mostly about the materiality of the virtual spaces, about neurosynaptic plasticity, about human-animal-machine relationships, machinic visions, and their invisible labor. We are in the search for the new communication strategies and spatio-temporal virtual space making to provide new relations between human and non-human, humans and their environments, both in physical and virtual sense. We will closely consider the human cognition as a bio-artifact shaped by the environment, possibly with the interactive virtual environment, but also the cognition as a digital embodied entity in forms of spatio-temporal virtual experiences. As in extended mind theory, Clark and Charms propose that cognition exists in the environment and in the objects, and they propose that some objects in the external environment can be parts of the cognitive processes, and in that way function as the extension of the mind itself, such as pen, pencil, calculator, cell phone, or time-based video gaming technologies that opens up parallel virtual worlds. In this conception, the virtual room can also be considered as an extension of the cognition, impacting the brain's plasticity. So the time-based new media and XR technologies allowed us to experiment with designing real-time virtual experiences, machinic eyes, that challenges this concept of embodied cognition. As an experimentation, during the 52 Hertz Weird Intermediate Beings Virtual Reality Seminar at the Studio 3 Institute for Experimental Architecture, we have dealt with new ways of seeing in LiDAR scan environments through various animal visions, such as snail, chameleon, dragonfly, clownfish, python, and bat, to create virtual reality experiences that can change the way we perceive our built environments. It seems like our ability for neuroplasticity paired with emerging tools to create immersive virtual environments opens up new and provoking ways to see and engage with the tangible and intangible worlds we are inhabiting. All the experiences developed during the seminar explore possible ways of engaging with simulated animal visions, in order to perceive built environment from a different point of view, from non-human point of view. These virtual companion machines, so-called, created embodied experiences in virtual spaces, augmenting the capacities of perceptual modes of cognition while developing new sensing modalities. And then what we have done is that we kind of listed a list of questions that we asked ourselves, or we confronted ourselves with, such as, what does it mean to escape from the human-centered visual regime, and how does it feel like to enter the sensory apparatus of an animal? Can the virtual experiences of inhabiting another creature challenge our most unquestioned routines, and so on? And can we provoke a sense of counter-visuality through experiencing other life forms? So I'm going to present two of the virtual reality experiences that were designed during the seminar, and one of them is called counterfactual mythology. Counterfactual mythology is about a chameleon vision, and the experience was designed by Jan Klassen, Anna Pompermeyer, Jim Magna, and Jonas Lengenfelder. The experience is meant to be discovered by two players at the same time. It enacts the story of Narcissist and Echo and offers a new type of relationship between the body and the space. And the first player, who wears the virtual reality headset, embodies the chameleon vision, moves through different virtual scenes, exploring the virtual world, with the eyes attached to hands, experimenting on the idea of the chameleon vision, as the chameleons can, or they do have a monocular vision, which means their brain can process the images from both eyes separately. And so the visitor is confronted and challenged to process two distinguished three-dimensional images at the same time with their bodily motions. And the second player, who's wearing the motion tracking suit, with his movements, he interacts with the colors, manipulates geometries, creates an immersive soundscape. And of course, it is kind of a challenging and unusual experience as one tries to merge two distinguished three-dimensional images in an ever-changing virtual environment. But then what is super interesting about it is that the way how you move in the space and you navigate in the space is somehow confronted, and then it also searches for new communication strategies inside the space. The next one is the next experience, which was developed during the virtual reality seminar, is called Unexpected Observer. And it is about the Dragonfly Experience, and it takes place in one of the most well-known and historical buildings of Innsbruck, the Hofkirche. We use a very high resolution of LiDAR scanning method for this project. And inside the experience, your vision will be ranging from another spectrum of colors and different speeds as you are usually perceiving, as the Dragonfly can process about 8 times more images than a human ever can. So that means that inside the experience, as you move inside the tiny body of the Dragonfly, your vision goes into a subdivision of into a hexagonal subdivision, and everything else goes into slow-mo. And what is also super architecturally interesting about it is that from the tiny body of the Dragonfly, you start perceiving the architecture that you have known before from a very unusual points of view. Sorry, this is another one. One starts inhabiting very weird spaces and ornaments and etc. So the virtual reality seminar was about to study the materiality of the virtual room as a digital spatio-temporal experiences that can impact the human cognition. Therefore, to argue in a way that the virtual room is a cognitive room. Another example to this concept of cognitive virtual spaces will be the project Campfire, which me and Uwe worked together on it during the past months, that considers the condition as a digital entity that exists outside of the human biophysical brain body. And then we try to see the whole idea of the cognition converse to non-human. So if the cognition exists at all in the virtual interactive spaces.
Yeah, and you might have seen this installation at Bruck's Vorbrenner in Innsbruck. Some students we saw, like some of you have been there at the opening also. So it's called, the project is called Campfire, virtual cognitive space. And it is a XR installation that aims to include the idea of campfire into the digital culture, thereby explores various types of immersive scenarios, experimental storytelling, that challenge the intrinsic relationship between body and mind. So the project, as I said before, was funded by Vorbrenner Innsbruck and was displayed at the Freies Theater in Innsbruck, Freies Theater Brugger in Innsbruck. So the project started by taking a close look at the social and cultural aspects of the fire that played a role in human evolution. So campfire was not only a place for storytelling, but also a place where humans learned to cook, like where they gathered, kind of where they exchanged, where they kind of like collectively imagined and so on. So the fire shaped basically the social and cultural relations between human and the environment, but also between human themselves, right? So those fire made us basically what we are today, and that's kind of out of question. So the project questions basically the equivalence of the fire in digital culture. So the campfire installation is an interactive virtual space that embodies a new type of collective storytelling, constituted by a collection of EEG scan data that includes objects, animals, secrets, symbols, stories, and corresponds to the visitors, which are there, like basically physically there in the installation, and it kind of corresponds to the visitors' emotions.
Yeah, I think I'll take over from here and give you slightly some insights about how we have developed the project, or what is happening actually inside the installation. Is that first we have collected stories from people by using, as you see here in the video, by using EEG headset that then constituted a collective cognition, a digital cognition, which contains emotions such as joy, anger, confidence, sadness, fear, and etc., each corresponding to 3D objects, sounds, animals, memories, and so on. So what I'm saying is that, like, as we have interviewed people, as we have asked them to tell us some stories, we recorded their brain activities, and anytime there was a peak in one of the brain activities as they were describing a situation or an object, that automatically went into an emotion pool. And then we have repeated this process until we have ended up with 350 objects and 7 different moods. What we have done later on is that we use IBM Watson cognitive cloud computing services, specifically speaking Tone Analyzer, which is an artificial intelligence model for this digital entity to interact with the Twitter posts. So the installation has a capacity to look at a hashtag or a profile or a keyword and kind of capture that word or hashtag and break that Twitter post into, as you see here as well, break the Twitter post into sentences and make a tone analysis. And then it gives scores such as joy 0.6 and anger 0.3. And it calls objects from the EEG data collection. And then it reveals somehow, like what it does is that it reveals moodscapes of the Twitter post in terms of spatio-temporal virtual worlds constituted by objects, and revealing cognitive activities in forms of new visual storytelling. Therefore, the experience intends to spark new and unexpected forms of communication, dialogue, and interaction between people and their environment. Another project that was dealing with the idea of the similar idea or similar intentions to spark new and unexpected forms of communication, dialogue, and interaction between people and their environment is the project that I have developed together with Anna Pompermeyer and Burkhard Schweighofer called Above Human. Above Human is a real-time data visualization, interactive real-time data visualization project of COVID-19. The project, why it's called Above Human, is because of the word epidemic, right? The word epidemic, by its origins, comes from the Greek epi, meaning upon or above, and demos, people. So metaphorically speaking, it could describe a supernatural force swarming through a system and taking its control, the way in which the entity or the virus enters and transforms the world of another. So it's somehow a space of coexistence. Above Human Epidemic Sphere is an attempt to translate the complex invisibility of the real-time data related to the coronavirus spread into something graspable in order to develop new communication strategies and a critical space of self-awareness. How we see this project is that in terms of this, again, what we have been mentioning, digital spatial temporal experiences, is that real-time data here is the substance for space making, immaterial materiality of space-time modification, flowing and reconfiguring the spatiality of this post-anthropocentric virtual and augmented space. Therefore, we are seeking for a visual communication strategy that is able to turn the scientific data into lucid hallucination through a new media interactive installation and communicate the complexity of the global issue in a virtual augmented environment. According to posthumanism as well, social structures are being redefined without inherently humane or biological origins, but rather in terms of social and psychological system where consciousness and communications exist as a disembodied entity. This disembodied virtual entity here in our project is represented by the infected global human body, controlled in real time by the spread of the virus inside the isolated, encapsulated countries. So the project, specifically speaking, visualizes the real-time data of the active cases per country inside a virtual world that continually updates itself according to the changes in the data set of COVID-19. The presence of the visitor affects the behavior of the implementation of the data inside the sphere. So what it does is that we have used a motion tracking camera here that is in constant communication with the visitor. It has its own perceptual, or it has its own perception to detect the people inside the exhibition area, to implement the data in forms of body, and then to kind of diffuse or dissolve that body inside the spherical floating sculpture. And what is also interesting about the project is that by observing the system in time, the users will be able to understand how the virus is developing and how it will eventually be extinguished, meaning that the installation must die at some point when the active cases of the epidemic comes or decreases to 0 amount. So yeah, I think from here I will pass it back to Uwe. Yeah.
So talking about temporal virtual worlds or environments and like modes of communication, this year we were also involved in a couple of creations of virtual worlds or virtual environments, either for teaching purposes or like for events like Vienna Design Week. So together with one of our colleagues, he might be also here now in the audience, Dominik Schwab is also teaching with us at Studio 3. We created this virtual hangout place, like this virtual garden called the Garden of Delete. Yeah. And it was like this hangout space where people could, like during visiting the virtual exhibitions during the Vienna Design Week, hang out, like have conversations and so on. So the interesting point is that we started this project by designing it completely in the virtual space. So meaning that we were not sitting on our desk and trying to rotate our file in Rhino or Maya on a two-dimensional screen, but we tried to design it in a full embodied way. So we were designing it in the virtual space, so making space in virtual reality. Yeah. And here you see a couple of excerpts of the space itself. So for this project, we invited a couple of artists, performance artists and DJs who kind of like did live events there. So basically streaming live events directly into virtual space. And I think in this video, what is very interesting, like, so there were like 5 different events, which with a duration of 1 hour, and people like visitors there inside the virtual world, they were really like not silent participators, but they were really active actors. So what was interesting about this specific performance was that people really started to interact with the virtual world. They start to construct, collectively construct the world. So they started to drag in from this library, which is offered by Mozilla Hubs, different images, GIFs, but also 3D models and fragments of spaces, and started to express their emotions or their moods through those objects. So it was a very different and in a way, non-abstract way of communication. So, and also a kind of collective world creation. Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking about the participatory virtual space making, I think you can go on with your next project, right?
Yeah, maybe you switch to the next one. Yeah, and making the transition to the last project here, like which I wanted to quickly show you. It's called The Smallest of Worlds, a social landscape of collected privacy. And it's basically an immersive archive and at the same time a spatial virtual reality essay. So this work I started in the beginning of April together with a stenographer, Bettina Lange, and the interactive designer, Jean Adilon. And our fascination for this project comes with the idea to capture a moment of a person's life in 3 dimensions. Yeah, and make this moment present and accessible again through virtual reality or virtual room. So really trying to capture one moment and re-inhabit that moment. So the project also presents a time capsule that let people re-inhabit domestic moments of people during social distancing and self-isolation. So in a sense, it is a way to grasp the time of pandemic through the lens of our very private domestic rituals and very intimate interior spaces. So here you see a little collection of those spaces we collected. So it's a very, like it's based, the whole project is based on crowdsource material. So people could for free, of course, participate in this art project and upload their scans or their videos, and we process them into 3-dimensional scans. And this immersive archive, the way we call it, counts at the moment 250 spaces and fragments of moments, as well as voice messages from the people who contributed. So at the moment, it's also a variety of like around 40 different nations. And the project is still under development, but you see a couple of like expressions here, glimpse into the virtual world. But it will be in the end an XR installation that invites visitors to navigate through a vast database of very private spaces in an essayistic full embodied mode. So The Smallest of Worlds is the world made of bits and pieces that opens up multiple perspectives and manifold ways of reading and perceiving space. It is an exploratory experience where the visitors have an active role in constructing meaning. And it resamples to a certain extent the very early attempts from VR pioneers to construct a thinking space. A thinking space in that sense that it offers a space that allows for an encounter of some sort of knowledge that is fundamentally rooted in experience. And also what you see here are kind of like the different contributions and also like the videos people send to us, which we then processed into 3-dimensional space. So in the end, it's going to be a huge archive which you can inhabit and walk through and explore, basically. So I think that was our last project we wanted to do tonight. And we would hand it over to Simeon and Zeynep.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that.
Yeah,
lovely.
thank
you guys.
Very immersive. Let's say, look into your work. It was really, really nice to listen to, because we don't get to do this often as well about each other's works. Really nice to have the opportunity to learn about each other's works.
Yeah, so thank you, Florina and Gonzalo, for the invitation, and also, of course, the lovely introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just get the screen share ready. Can all of you see our screen properly? I guess, yes. I can see the yellow tiles. But I think we will just have a more of a discussion going through these type of images that we accumulated about our works. We just wanted to share a little bit of an insight of what we worked on currently, and also what are our points of, let's say, with dealing with the art and architectural realms that kind of seem to come together certain times in our discourse.
Yeah, because as Florina already mentioned in the introduction, we have, beside the teaching practice, having a design practice called Formerly Not Known, which we will mostly talk about today, but then at the same time having a publishing business and my practice, or like my profession in the gallery. So there are like multiple things coming together, and we try to present like a couple of glimpses.
Yeah, I think we will, we'll just like make a short presentation of our works currently. We just wanted to start with this specific initial slide of, let's say, showcasing. It helps us to understand a little bit our practice, as well as like kind of justify the validity of it. Therefore, so for us, it's important to also start by sharing this one. Yeah, it's
which is a statement, I mean, called Statement of Intent from Lawrence Wiener, a conceptual artist that started out in the 60s and works mostly with conceptual topics, creating mental sculptures in the observer's mind, let's say. So what he does is write description of sculptures on the wall, and to like better understand his way of working, or maybe general conceptual art or conceptual working, we thought that this might be a nice starting point for also the following projects.
Yeah, because once we were thinking of like what to show for today, it was really clear to us that we don't really operate within one or the other, like art or architecture, but somehow somewhere between, and always within a discussion with both sides. And I almost feel like we don't want to commit to one or the other, so therefore it's always in between, in that like gray zone of non-conforming point of view. So we try a little bit of explaining this by the end of like, it's also just about the concept in the mind for us.
Yeah. And also not being bound to a medium, probably. What we found out the last couple of like months, or like the time we were talking, that this kind of statement of his, that the artist could construct a piece, or it could be fabricated, or it doesn't even have to be built at all, in the sense that it can solely exist in one's mind or in a conversation, or as a note, and that all of those are equal.
And it's an important point to make, that there needs to be a receiver and let's say a giver of this concept to the outside world, and therefore as long as that exists, everything else is somehow irrelevant. Of course, that's a very tricky thing to state as well, but we'll talk about the representation a little bit further. So
a lot of our work starts off or deals with collecting things or objects themselves. So these are like to start out with two projects we did. The left one being called Cache Memory, where we were looking into objects that might have memory, or having memories attached, also photos, to look at found photos and what they evoke in our perception. And then, of course, in the combination with other objects that don't come from the same source as the images, but still create a narrative through this juxtaposition and placement between them.
And I think often we find that like we wanted to show this as a dichotomy right now, although it is of the same, let's say, a diptych together, because it's a similar way of collecting things, just bound by the idea of concept. So on the right, you see Separated at Birth, which is a project we collaborated for the IARC show. And it was basically a cabinet of curiosities made out of all twin objects of the world, or somehow like things that are formally twin or formally bound to each other. And this was a collection and showcasing of this and the cabinet itself being also a twin cabinet kind of helped this concept of this obsession of this idea of collection. And on the left, you can almost see, again, the similar idea of a kind of hoarding, if you will. But in the sense, the concept is different. In this one, it was bound by memory and nostalgia on the right side of nostalgia that is fabricated, not ours maybe, but a fabricated nostalgia, a fictional nostalgia of the people and the images. And on the right, something a bit more directed towards twinship. And if we go on to the next one, this was the other one that we did
and
for-
this, like from the same show, also still going on with the topic of collecting, was when we were looking into how to collect buildings or building parts, or looking at the world as it is, and kind of realizing that our perspective shifted of how we read like different cities. Because I mean, yes, we can travel there and we drive down the road or we walk down the road, but especially also with this pandemic, we like being bound to more or less one location. We travel places maybe on Google Earth, or we see drone footage, and so this new way of reading a city, rather than from like the street view, we see it from like a God's mode, like a bird's eye view. Things start to look different, like our perspective changed into a different one, and we don't have a direction anymore on where to go, whereas a street could lead us down or up the road. And in Google Maps, yeah,
I think it changes the way we interact with the current urban condition. And we, needless to say, we also teach at the Urban Institute, so it's kind of always a question on the back of our minds, and how you interact with the city. So it's all of a sudden this idea of kind of these in-between spaces, almost flattened throughout the city, becomes quite a, let's say, a thing to want to look into a little bit further, right? That things moving into each other and not having boundaries as we are used to.
Because it's also more or less an image that we see rather than a three-dimensional object, and therefore the diagram of roofs and pools. So the project being called Jumping from Pool to Roof, that now urban entities can move into each other because they're not bound to the ground anymore, or bound to each other. So things start to shift. And then of course also with the idea of collecting or having objects, the question on how do they come together, which is, I mean, one of the oldest topics of architecture or creating maybe. So with like the next project.
Takes a bit of time to load, but it'll be here hopefully soon. We'll be with you shortly. Yeah, there we go.
So this ongoing series of cream objects, dealing exactly with this in-between space of objects. How are they put together? So kind of exaggerating the glue that binds objects together, and glue being then an object by itself.
And what would it look like if it was emphasized, right? All of a sudden, the things that put together objects had an entity to themselves and a character to themselves. What would it look like, and how would it how would it situate itself? Would it be on the ground? Would it have its own ground? These are all these type of questions. Let's say we had while working with this project of, let's say, what is the idea of challenging, let's say, objects or assembling things together, and how can you like take that concept into a more literal way of what if everything that is in the assemblage is equal, although also the glue. So continuing on.
I mean, also the idea of breaking the hierarchy. That like these objects, I mean, all objects in the world have a certain hierarchy, but we also believe that, or like question, what if they don't? So
I mean, this was the context of our series, so it's like it's pretty easy to understand that we were interested in the content to context relationship as a concept, basically. So what is foreground, what is background, especially in the architectural realm? We talk a lot about it, as well as like background being like literally the ground condition versus, you know, these type of, like when you put that kind of image concepts into the real 3D world, and what kind of I think the dissidence that happens there is quite interesting to us. So we wanted to take that one step further with like these type of image creation of the simulations, so that they would have it would create that kind of break in the thing that we know to be real, of something filled purely with content, that it becomes context at the end.
Yeah, which then also with the next project, kind of like taking it from a two-dimensional, like from an image to a project that is more spatial, taking this idea of only architecture, only buildings, or only content, no no background, just context.
Mhm.
Into consideration is this project, which is probably like the biggest one we've done so far, and works more in a, I mean, how would you say, just like every program filled together.
Mhm. And it's actually about hierarchy, right? Like,
Yeah.
so nothing is trying to overshadow each other. Even the empty plot you can see here was designed to be an empty plot, because we are trying to, again, talk about the significance of things as a hierarchical point that are somehow somewhat equal to within each other, within the city, as we see it, right? And experience it somehow, that it is our opinion or our point of view was to recreate this within our more architectural projects.
And then, of course, with the next one, again, having this glue element as a in-between space that is like architecture itself, binding like 6 single-family houses together, or combining different city blocks, so that things don't need to have a boundary anymore, not being confined to a plot line or to having a definition, which is also like probably one of the things that is not being able to define.
Yeah, I would say like it was also about the idea of what's a site at the 20, like let's say in the current condition, right?
Yeah.
What's actually the potential of the future of, let's say,
of housing.
And so this in specific in the left side that you see in this project, it was it's called home. So it's a little bit of also a play on the fact that there's like this it's a careful, let's say, practice of how to layer different urban projects, or let's say urban programs that are within the city itself in micro homes, so in micro districts that we have created. And on the right, you see the future of buying, somehow that there was like this, we wanted to just showcase these not as real projects, but as possibility of
how to reimagine the like commercial complex of something that, well,
not
of course,
be built from bottom up, basically.
And of course, like shifts, with the 21st century.
Exactly. And grounds that are no. And then we shift into the more gallery.
And then, I mean, this is just like a small slide to show some of the projects, like 4 projects of the last, I think 2 years. So we just picked like those to show that this working with concepts, I mean, working on our own concepts, but then also supporting artists in the gallery to work on their concepts is kind of the thing that we saw, okay, that binds our practice together of assisting the artists realize their idea. Coming back to this, it can be fabricated, which in this case is being fabricated or was fabricated. So like the banners that you can see currently in front of the gallery in the Allerstraße, being fabricated for the artist Matt Mullican, and the right top from Thomas Vaillo, a sculpture, which is like a combination of sculpture and painting on the wall, and then full-on wall space installation of Peter Kogler. So this assisting the artists and helping them kind of also made us realize that we would like to not just make the artworks themselves and assist them in that, but also to talk with them about it. So we decided to make the publishing house. Yeah,
I think that was like our, like it made us pursue this like often more saturated way, because for us it was really about how do you materialize the idea of concept through repetition, right? So we have also like often kind of talked about with our projects, like collecting and somehow like repeating things that exist within the city within itself, or things that exist within an image within itself. So there was always these like acceleration ideas, and also like kind of turning on itself often. And in this case as well, I think when we look back at the book projects we've done this year, we can also safely say most of the projects we do is somehow similar at the core of it. That of course art is completely different from each other and artists themselves, but
there's
somehow,
an intersection of the conversations also with the artists. So for instance, with Oliver Larridge, this book also represents one of his collections, which is a collection of 3D scans that he did from 2012 till, or like ongoing actually, where he collects these scans, or he makes those scans, and then uploads them to 3dscans.com, where they're like available as an open source data to be used for everyone. So he also stands in this relation of original object appropriated into a digital realm where others then can use it and give it a new life.
Yeah, and the only way to showcase the nature of this project is not through, let's say, tagging him on these objects, but like to look at them in one go of their let's say comparability of how many different ways this object that is fed into this multiple authors were then used as entities, and then come out as entities of them all, of their own, you know. So it was a kind of a collection, basically, where there was a possibility to see all of these objects multiple times used and in creative realms understood. And something funny actually, because to continue, I guess we should probably state that.
Because, I mean, yeah, like you can also with this, well, it's also funny that we have the Hofkirche again that we saw already in the presentation before, but this one also kind of like, it's nice to probably like to show that how different our days are of making a book, and then at the same time being able to supporting him to make the scan for him, because he was at that time not being able to come to Innsbruck because there was already like
almost pandemic time because I was working on a show in the gallery. And so to follow that process of scanning it and then having it in the virtual realm,
like having it in the digital, where I mean, like the projects in the book, and then having it as a reproduced sculpture in a show.
In a totally different context than it was before. It was quite an interesting experience. And I think when we say we work with the publishing company, it's somehow different than or the publishing press. It's most of the time like this more of a hands-on approach of like talking to the artist often and like kind of trying to get the idea out of, let's say, the constraints of geography or whatever you are, and how and why like we can't do it, but rather
because it's also not like a classical designer. Like it's this assistant, like assisting them to create their work, which is then I think the next one with this one as well of helping the art, like the Finnish artist Riku Sakinen, how to make a book that suits his project best. And of course there is like a production side to this, but then also like a long discussion on how what's the best concept, the best way to.
Because I think they also represent a very variety of concepts of like collecting. Like, so again, it's funny that now that we talk about it, we can see that in this light, that there's this kind of compilation of collection of a single body of work that needs to go out there and stay there in the world as a statement of the artist's work. So it's quite an honor that they decide to work with us. And the upcoming project, I think this is the last.
Yeah, this is the last one. This is a biography, actually a painter's biography from the German painter Alexander Wolff, who asked us to work with him on this book, where he tells his biography of spaces of art production. So what he wanted to do with this one is to show spaces, kind of like a narrative throughout the years of where art happened, where art got discussed. So everything but the exhibitions that we normally see. So where we mostly see the artwork being represented in a, or presented in a white cube, this is the opposite. So to have these,
yeah. I think it's the kind of, I think he didn't want it to be such a, let's say, grunge aspect of the artists' lives, but it ends up being somehow anyhow, because there's this kind of very endearing thing of taking picture of your, similar to, again, what you talked about, we like actually what Cenk and Uwe mentioned, especially like Uwe mentioned in the last few minutes of this kind of smallest worlds possible. So this idea of taking something so personal as a living room of a friend of yours and kind of having it, showing it out there is quite an endearing process, actually. So we are now working on that, and yeah.
So these are a couple of
that's
projects
kind of,
that we're working on or worked on.
Very fast way of talking about our body of work, but yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. So should we stop sharing? Yes, there we go.
Thank you, guys. Lovely presentations. So now, Florina, the pressure is now on us. After this level, we are forced to say something smart. So think double. You need to think twice.
Well, say something not necessarily smart, just.
I'm sure it will be smart.
You wanna go? Or I ask, Florina.
I can go if you wish.
Sure, yeah, sure.
So actually, I don't have any like clear thoughts. This was like, I felt like I was immersed in a kind of a fantastic universe in a way, because it made me think of so many things. And like, I'm not necessarily trying to make a link between what Uwe and Cenk showed and what Zeynep and Simeon's work is, but what fascinated me so much is actually the power of the immaterial, which is in a way present in both discourses. And I thought, in a way, like starting from the citation you started your presentation with, Zeynep and Simeon, I thought actually, like, there was a huge discussion about if the artwork itself is like the physical artwork, or if it actually exists in the mind of the person, like of the person experiencing it. And then like departing from this point, actually it, like in both like lines of thought, it's actually about like either a mental construct, a mental perception of a physical something, or like a mental perception of a virtual something space. So it's quite powerful, right? In the end. So sorry, I'm mixing everything up, but I'm so fascinated by the fact that actually the whole, or not the whole, but like the powerful aspect of it is this immaterial.
I think what you say, thank you so much for pointing that out, because I think when we had that kind of moment of tackling this topic of, okay, I mean, obviously it's always endearing to talk about your work, right? You're like, okay, like, how do you present yourself to the point of that, like, you kind of theorize your works? It is, of course, you're thinking of that on the point of creation of these works and like doing them, but often it is somehow something that exists within your own mind or within the collective's mind, together with discussions. But to also present it as a let's say conceptual matter, it's a quite let's say, it's a hard task to it's a hard thought as well, basically. So it was understand, it was making everything a bit more clear for us to understand before we even had this discussion today, that like we have that kind of concept where everything exists outside of the immaterial, and then there's the discussion of the material comes when it is applied, if it is applied to a location or to a point.
Because it all, like, I mean, of course, it doesn't exclude it being like materialized, or I mean, because also when we consider our like writing an equal project than something drafted or something made.
But I think, in that sense, it's also, I would be lying if I said, yes, the representation does not matter. Of course, it's a very big, important part of how you translate your ideas to the world as well. So obviously, that's also material to us, even though it is in the digital or it's in the, let's say, virtual. So it always has this kind of discussion, whether it be, I mean, we do construct it, it's just not in the traditional sense, maybe.
Not in the physical.
Yeah, not in the physical. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out.
I could go on with one more question, and then I can give the word to you, Gonzalo, and to our audience, of course. So please feel free to join and interact. Like, I was wondering if, so, I mean, in a way, in both blocks of presentations, like the topic of the fragment was an issue, kind of, and also like maybe more in yours, but like this collecting of fragments, and depending on the the decision of putting them in a precise order or another, you can kind of generate different narratives, but kind of so different narratives. But still, like now I'm referring on Uwe's like last project, which struck me because I thought it's quite a strong experience to have so many fragments put together and then just let the visitor kind of make these cross links. And, you know, like depending on the person who experiences it, actually, it's always a new experience that happens. And that was quite so, yeah, I think it's super interesting, this working with fragments in order to let, in a way, the freedom to discover like personal narrative.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, this is also what like basically Simeon and Zeynep were showing at the beginning, right? Like especially with the first project also, like, and you also named it like, you know, creating different narratives through juxtaposition. And I think what this also like we're all engaging with, we're not trying to to put top down way like this huge narrative on top of a work or this major narrative. But like, I think it's more interesting to give people or the audience like a voice in that sense, you know, and to create meaning out of the stuff you put out there. So that doesn't mean that you are not doing anything anymore as an architect, but you still, you know, creating these tensions between objects, between fragments. Because I mean, especially in that, in this immersive archive, like the smallest of worlds, there's also sound, right? There are also like voice messages, and from over 40 nations at the moment. So it's like really a wild mixture of stuff going on, like statements, but also spaces, different cultures. It's merging together. And of course, I mean, it has to be a pre-selection. It's not just taking a data set, and let somebody retrieve it, but it's a little bit of a kind of a curation of it, but then trying to leave it open as much as possible, that the people have their own experience and a stronger experience because they can relate back to their own story, right? And to their own kind of personal, like, yeah, to their own data set, what they experience throughout their life. I think that's super important.
I think, if I may just intrude before Gonzalo gets the word, but I think in your work, Campfire, it's also very, that's one thing we both had the kind of, like we wrote down, like it's also super nice because you have let's say a pool of objects, yeah, but they are somehow relating to each other within these three, let's say, really major screens, but they are somehow things that are significant to our like human
Emotions.
life, right? Or emotions or things are somehow you can relate in some sort of way. And I think that's so important that you mentioned that relatability aspect of that. It's just not just a narrative that no one can relate to, that other than the person who has experienced it, right? A cup has a meaning for me than it has maybe for someone else, but a cup as itself is also has a meaning for me as a human. So I think I like that idea of the curation that you mentioned. Definitely, it is how it is.
I mean,
It's a
also
very good
being
point.
also having this open-ended meaning, like a subjective meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I wanted to say. Now back to you, Gonzalo.
You wanted to say something, Cenk, as well, right?
No, I was just agreeing. I was shaking my head, meaning that I was agreeing what Simeon and Zeynep was telling about the campfire, like just shaking my head. Go ahead, Gonzalo. It's your turn.
No. I mean, actually, this is about conversation in between
Mm-hmm.
the teams. Florina and me is just to be sure that you keep on talking.
Yeah.
It's not about our points.
I mean, I actually would like a question, because there was one point, I don't know which project it was, where you were saying that now the building or now the environment is perceived from the view of an animal.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was also in the Hofkirch, or like the project before.
Oh,
But so like most of the projects, I don't want, probably like all of them have this conversational element to it. As you also pointed out, there's this like observer space or space, or like in the last one, the campfire, like these objects that kind of collide and try to, well, like are constantly in a flux of
tension or something.
movement. So is does it also work for an object to perceive the space? Or like, or where do you see the difference between an animal and
an object?
And an object or a human?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were thinking about that concept in the campfire. I think we will work on that actually. We were speaking about, I think we even told you about it once, that it would be super cool if they, within the environment, virtual environment, if the objects started interacting with each other, if there was a giant pen marker started brushing all over, and it would completely, like totally get, mad space, and maybe it would just decide on disappearing from the virtual environment and so on. I think we considered those aspects of how much we can take that idea of those objects also then start perceiving. And that's why the idea of this having 3 giant vertical screens was like kind of that swallows you almost inside the installation, right? And they were 3 of them inside the conversation, like 3 giant screen, as if they are sitting around the campfire and conversing, like, inside of a communication.
I also like the fact that there was like actual objects in the, like it's like this kind of, you see them super, super large and on the screen, but also there's this kind of keepsakes or fragments again of, that reminds you, these are all exist within your daily life, and somehow.
In the other case, in the case of 52 Hertz, like the virtual reality seminar, it was quite specific to enter the sensory apparatus of an animal, right? Like it was quite scientific knowledge and research to base on, like how the animal perceives and so on, and like to simulate it in a virtual environment. Then space-time will start, as mentioned in the beginning, like this immateriality of the, this whole narrative. That's actually one of the things that we are trying to understand. How much can we take that idea further if the virtual space is immaterial or material at all? If it has its own materialization process, whether considered within the plasticity of the brain or in the body of the human, like how we get along with those spaces and how much they do to you, which I can refer to Harun Farokhi in that sense, what he calls as operational images, right? That images is not representation of something, but they do something in the world, and they have their own way of communicating and affecting. So I think that's one of the discussions that we also consider, like how material are those spaces?
And how what's the power of them, right? What's the value of them? Are they kind of transformable? Like, you know, are they transform you as a person who are venturing into it? And I would like also have I would ask you guys again for something like, because of course you are also like collecting a lot of stuff and get your inspiration by really creating, like also like this project. I really love this cabinet of curiosity where you found the twins, right? But I was like thinking, what is actually in a digital age, right, where you have these huge archives, right, online, you know, like go to Sketchfab, you have so much stuff there. So is there relevance for doing a personal archive? You know, like, is there still a relevance for doing an archive or not, for collecting stuff?
I would say so, because the thing is, for me, for example, one of the most interesting things is to look through someone else's bookshelf. Like, I truly like to see someone else's selection of things, like, because I don't know, maybe it's just a personal thing, but I don't know what you are thinking, right? Like, I know you as a person, I know Simeon as a person, but still it depends on the person and their own thought structure and their own, let's say, standpoint, whether it be artistic, whether it be like totally not related to art at all. But I still question how that collection works or kind of is getting managed, right? Or what do you put in your archive is simply something personal, right? Because you don't really do it in the hopes that someone else sees it. Maybe Zoom call background bookshelves are, but like, you know, the idea of like showcasing something that is very dear to yours. That's why maybe it also goes back to your project as well, in that sense, that it's somehow a personal aspect to it, right? The archive of your own collection or your own selection is valid because you're different than everyone else in the world somehow. Yeah, you can have very similar interests or tastes or whatever, but
because most collections look very different from one another. I mean, it also depends on how you curate your collection, or what's I mean, in general, about collecting, what you want to collect and what's the strategy, because some things you can't have everything, but of course if you collect Pokemon cards, then you can attempt to have all the cards. And actually have a goal. But with let's say our collection so far, there is no like end to it.
Because you can always look at it with a different set of glasses and see something else. So I think that's the narrative in this case that you're kind of talking about, that this kind of overlaying. We didn't mention, actually, we were talking a lot about hashtags. So yeah, that sounds vain and kind of stupid, but in the sense, hear me out. The idea of hashtags is basically kind of, you have one object that you can define with multiple things according to attributes, right? So you have like, let's say if it's a red cup, you have hashtag cup, hashtag red, hashtag hydration, or whatever you want to say. But there's a lot of things that get attached to it by just like able to see it, right? And write it out. So in a way, when we look at our works, a lot of times we're also able to look at it through a filter of those kind of mind hashtags, concept hashtags. And I think it's the same way with any collection that is anyone's thing. But it's relevant to you, not so much to the world, maybe, you know?
Yeah. But on the other hand, like, I mean, like if you think of virtual spaces now, you know, it's also like a tool of expression, right? Like your collection is a tool of expression, which is a non-verbal expression, right? Because everybody gets a very private glimpse of what you like, kind of who you are, or makes up their own stories about the person. And then you know, like, because I mean, reflecting back to the smallest of words, you know, like when I started to collect spaces, right? I mean, those are not my spaces, but I could start to just collect spaces the next 20 years and use this as an expression tool to let people like experience a space, you know, like verbal language, but doing it with spaces. And so I was wondering, like, because you in your projects, in your architectural projects, are you also would take on that step and think that it's, you know, like architecture becomes so personal again when you start to really let people experience your collection of spaces?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, collecting is one thing, but also then how to display.
Yeah.
A museum also can have a great collection, but can have a display, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like, what do you put next to each other?
Matter.
Kind of matters. And of course, then, I mean, what are the hashtags to put it in a playlist?
Yeah.
Or how do you put them together? And that's kind of I think what we're in every project kind of dealing with. How do we curate our objects of the collection?
This idea of the hashtag is also interesting. Like, I think I want to talk about it also a little bit. Like, me and Uwe, we were also considering, or we actually used the model of hashtag in the Campfire project, right? It was capturing literally a hashtag to kind of build up this temporal experiences, because the hashtag, it is actually the metadata, right? Like Zainab, you have mentioned, it's how to meaning, how to value, how to tag something up. Like in cyberspace, literally, it's data informing data, meaning that it's giving a meaning to something. Otherwise, nothing has a meaning. Otherwise, you cannot navigate in the space. Otherwise, and we are also actually trying to experiment with that idea of the hashtag and metadata in the virtual reality seminar this semester. But it worked quite well in our case, how we capture this hashtag, and it revealed this cognitive most. No, it revealed this emotional scapes of people that posted something through Twitter. Yeah, I don't know where this conversation will lead with hashtag, but it was an interesting aspect when speaking about this collective archive and what's the value of it that you guys were saying. No, it's yeah.
And then I will change the hashtag topic.
Yeah, of course.
He's the one that doesn't like the hashtag.
No, I think that I don't know. I will just make some kind of hybrid of comments and questions. Just put it on the table, and then you react however you want. And then probably, not to make this too long, we can just open the if someone in the audience have a question or not. I think that I try to find actually similarities in between the two body of works, which are actually pretty different. But I'm coming to some kind of common ground that probably is actually good for the students to realize that architecture it's having, through technology, cultural impacts, whatever we want to call it, new modes of practice, right? So this is something that we are not forced anymore to think architecture as we always think that we should have our own office to do projects, competitions, find clients, have the money, and then put it in a physical building, right? And actually, this is an interesting point to say that we don't need, the architecture is not medium specific anymore, right? And you were talking before about some kind of how we can materialize the same idea through physical media, etc., and it still has their own value. This is verbal, written, through images, and each of these medium always have their own challenge, right? According to whatever thing you want to represent. So in this case, I'm absolutely with you, Zainab, that representation definitely matters, but in all the constellation, right? So it's not anymore, it's the physical space as such, but the question of materiality, of how we understand this medium is the one that tends to be challenged. So is this actually the mind image of a project, actually the material? I believe in that, at least. That the question of the material is somehow much more hidden in the background. And the question of the medium that we have to represent something, it's way larger. And as soon as it is a representation, I would say that is it material. And therefore, and it's extremely significant in how you also, the change of the mediums allows you to play with what are the oral, I would say, traditional topics or paradigms in architecture, right? So whether it is the private versus the public, or the background versus the foreground. And this is extremely relevant in your projects. I don't know, for instance, in Simeon's collages, actually the meaning of the content is actually becoming the background, right? And so you have not clear boundary anymore. In the same case, in last Uwe's project, the question of what we understand as private and public is not there anymore as well, right? Because actually you are exhibiting in a public realm what is your most intimate and private space. So I think this kind of duality is the one that is productive in order to keep on researching and doing practice. But if I can say, for me, the most surprising common ground that Uwe both has is the topic of semantics, if I can jump into that. Because the first two guys, you speak about the non-dependency of the physical space, right? So you try to find your own space, or you try to understand the own logics of the virtual. But I'm shocking, or not shocking. I'm somehow want to ask. I'm surprised that you're still referring to the physical, right? Through a semanticity in the meaning of objects. You are displaying daily objects, right? Probably less in this garden, in this virtual garden project, but in any others, in the rest, you still keep on showing some kind of familiarity with what we understand in how we behave in the real, at least in the object that you display. And this is a point that it will be interesting to discuss. So I have the feeling that in order to domesticate a foreign medium, you need something that is already familiar semantically. While in your case, Simeon and Cedric, I would say that is actually the opposite. In your composition or in your cream things, what you want to do is actually remove the semantic or the meaning that we associate to these daily objects, right? So you want to reverse the thing. I don't know if how you react to those things.
Yeah, I don't know. Should I go first, like quickly? I mean, no, I think it's an interesting observation. I mean, what I think, like especially in the virtual space, I think we always need the physical space, because I think the feedback loop between those two spaces is important and interesting, and how these different two spaces are materialized in the different realms. So how the physical moves into the virtual, and also the virtual into the physical. But the thing is with the objects, I mean, you're totally right, but I think that also like that there are certain aspects, yeah, which should be still in the virtual that makes it kind of recognizable, not recognizable, but let's say that there are certain aspects that, because you're still in your body, you still have a body, you still have a mind, right? So there's this transition between the two realms, right? And so you can't, I think it's very hard to really go in a virtual space and change completely the navigation for it, right? I mean, we are trying it out, right? We're giving different modes of flying through the space, shrinking down to a mosquito, right? And stuff like that, perceiving the space in different ways, yeah, and so on. But the thing is that we're still having a body, yeah, we still are kind of bound to physical space. So I think to completely delete that and like throw people into the virtual space without reference, yeah, to a physical space, I think that's not working. Not now. Maybe it will in a couple of years, and doesn't make much sense anymore to refer back to the physical. But to some extent, I think it's still important, because you are between spaces when you have a VR headset on, right? You are still in the physical, but you're also in the virtual. You're between yourself and the other. You're between the physical and the virtual. So there's always this kind of link. Yeah, I'm done.
I also agree that there needs to be some certain translation, but then also like something that you can relate to when it comes to virtual environment, like through this embodied interfaces. When you enter a virtual space, if you remove what you have known so far before in your life, like if you remove all of them, and if you come up with a certain space that actually I am testing out with this real-time data, right? And in like fluid virtual environments, you cannot relate to it. You simply don't make any value out of it. You don't make sense out of it, and then you don't know how to judge it. You don't know how to evaluate such.
But then do you think that this is simply, sorry that I keep on going, very quick. Do you think that this is actually something there is embedded in our DNA to some extent, and we are during the whole evolution of humanity simply getting used to the physical realm, and there is simply an issue of getting used to navigate it within the virtual, and we will develop the same kind of cognitive autonomous or independence, non-relational with the realm, I don't know, self-capacity to just relate in pure virtual terms.
Yes, but I think
it's a matter of getting used to.
I think this should be seen from an evolutionary aspect, not revolutionary, because otherwise it's like, there needs to be a gradual transition. I believe so, because otherwise it's really like removing the gravity now, and then like the humanities of like, you just don't make any sense out of it, But I agree that it somehow embodies slowly the way how we get used to those tools is already educating, and then you kind of gives a certain capacity of understanding the virtual space through these embodied mediums.
Yeah, I mean, totally agree. And there's also, I mean, there's so much happening, especially also through the pandemic at the moment, right? There's so much virtual spaces are getting thrown out there. There's so much different ways of navigating through those spaces, right? I mean, you can go through Mozilla Hub rooms and spend like days on just venturing through them, right? And every space is different and has different mechanics and has different affordances, different way you interact with that stuff. So this is already quite striking, I think. This is already quite striking, that this element of uncertainty from going one space to another, even though you're in the same environment.
But it always relates to what we know as the real world, right? And I also question, does it have to relate to that? Because I was kind of thinking, okay, what would be that experience? And then in a way, when you think of paintings by Ed Reinhardt or Mark Rothko, he was trying to have this virtual space that you as the observer just float in that space.
Yeah, the edges that they don't.
So like you don't.
Border. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, like with these paintings, you don't have anything that you can like hold on to in that space. And I was wondering, does it then actually need to have the gravity or to have these objects that tie us to what we know?
But I think it somehow, like when you also mentioned about the Vienna Design Week thing with the people are gonna hate me for saying it like this, but the GIFs or GIFs, whatever you call it, doesn't matter, either or. So there's this kind of human aspect to it. I think it's again with Cenk, what he said about this gradual kind of getting used to. It's not necessarily something that is completely abstract that you can now get habituated in. I think it has to have that kind of aspect of semantics. It's again a semantic discussion, like what you can relate to versus not, I think.
And I have the feeling that the works are getting so much personal, like, like when you now at the moment in the practice and you do virtual worlds, right? You at the moment, it's like that you're doing it by yourself. Like you can change anything, right? What you said, you can change the physics, right? You can change the perspectives, you can create a vision, yeah, so on. So at the moment is so that you are creating, or we have still the tools and the capability to do it by ourselves, right? So you are delivering a virtual world directly to the client. So it's also a very personal thing, right? Because you can change so much at the moment without somebody in between, except the software.
Yeah.
So I think this is also kind of striking. I don't know what you think about that, but it's a very personal thing you deliver because you're so free at the moment.
I thought, Gonzalo, you moved like this because you were going to say something and then you didn't move. And then I thought, let us down. But I explained myself. But
it was a too complex question for me to.
Yeah.
It's a new Gesamtkunstwerk, of course.
It is true somehow to some extent. Like it's not necessarily just a joke. So that you have to understand everything as an entity to design, to the like even the gravity of however much the conditions itself will also become like
To then change it, you mean?
Yeah, the habitat of the space of whatever, it becomes also an entity you can decide on, which is that's kind of the immersive experience, I would say, of designing as the I don't know, yeah, in the semantic work.
But I also like how you pointed it out, Gonzalo, because I like of us using like these objects, but then actually not using them as they are meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you kind of then have to know the objects, what they are, to then change their reading. And it's true that we kind of play with this notion of how familiar or unfamiliar are we with these type of objects.
And you said, I think something like you said like we are reversing the semantic version. I would say like we kind of play with the semantic qualities of the objects and try to emphasize the non-semantic objects that are kind of developing around a bit more abstract to bring them to a level of like, that's the part that we try to actively reverse, I think. So if everything was somehow relatable, what happens then, right? So you have a kind of this concussion of all things that you can relate to. And I think that's how I felt when I was looking at the campfire. So I think honestly, because we went to the installation, and for me, I could just watch it for hours on end, because there was this kind of feeling of tension in between things I can relate to, and somehow they had this kind of mind of their own and a power to them. So I think in that sense, things that relate to us as human, as if you are obviously making it for a viewer that is a human viewer, I think it makes a difference to have that discussion of the semantics, definitely.
I think we can open if there is any question in the audience. I mean, in the chat, there is, well, we have one congratulation for the event, and but no questions. So I don't know if someone want to ask something.
I think Ani is going to ask us something.
We have our usual suspects always.
Yeah, I'm nervous now.
All pressure's on you. Everyone is watching you.
I wish I'd presented at some point to you guys. And I really love the work though. Yeah, I think I don't know who to direct it. Maybe Uwe, from what I've heard, might be closest. I've never actually can't remember speaking very closely about their work, but really cool stuff. I was just curious actually, and I hope this is not one of those irritating questions about talk about what I showed, not about anything else. But I was just curious in the project about the scans where people upload scans, and I really like this kind of opening up to authors of all kinds idea, and that it comes up across the whole globe. And it's the way you describe it, it sounds like a huge project in terms of yeah, just the variety of scans that you might be getting. So basically, I'm super curious about how you select, basically, like I think even with the virtual and the real debate or the questions that you guys were trying to discuss a few minutes ago, my question has more to do with, okay, let's say a scenario where somebody uploads a single shot from what's his name? From the Grand Budapest Hotel movie, you know? How do you see that kind of a construction of a visual scenario within your project? Instead of recording something of their own bedroom, someone puts their favorite shot from a movie set. And obviously the set has been highly constructed and designed, and sort of links to an ontology with it, which is very internal to that script. And you know, this whole discussion about the personal and the possibility of an expression. How do you see something that's I don't know if it's the right word, but artificially constructed by a line of cultural sort of questions that they've gone through. I'm sure Wes Anderson has. And how do you see that? Because, you know, I guess I'm just obsessed with Bollywood or something. I don't know. But I really love the platform or the idea of such a project. And I'm curious, as a curatorial position, what would be the position for such highly constructed ontologies that are very, very internal, let's say, which is quite similar to when someone posts a video of their bedroom, no?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think I don't know, like, to be honest, I don't know if those videos are super, I mean, I guess they're super private ones, but I guess like most of them are also very constructed, right? I mean, this is like posting something personal on Instagram. I mean, this is an art project, so it doesn't have this like wide audience, but like I think we have anyways to rediscuss what's private, what's intimate, and what's public. I mean, I think this is anyways like those are boundaries that slowly dissolve in a way, right? So we always try to present ourselves in a way. And I think I don't know, like, I mean, what I have troubles with, you know, like, I mean, you're getting a lot of spaces that are very generic, you know, like you can say, like, there are most of them, like, there are the furniture inside, you know, because most of the people are buying at IKEA, right? So, I mean, there is this, but then people are starting to construct their space, right? And they really try to like arrange stuff, you know, making compositions and try to also create little narratives, like micro narratives within their space and send us that, right? I mean, this is highly constructed, but it gets also very much more interesting to, like, you know, to explore those spaces and create your own kind of narrative to it. And then, of course, there's this natural not natural selection, but there's also like people who take time to scan their environment or make videos. And then there are people that are very not careful in taking the pictures or taking the video, right? So by then processing those spaces, so you have very much fragmented ones, right? It's very hard to find any similarities, but they're getting like they're having their own right, you know, like they're getting something, it's something different, right? It's still a very personal thing somehow, yeah, because it's from somewhere's home, but it's very hard to grasp those scans, right? Whereas you have other ones that are super precise, you know, and super carefully taken. So there's this huge variety of different kind of scans. And I mean, the thing is also that we haven't selected like or categorized all of them. It's also a question, how do you categorize them? What are the what are the guidelines of doing that? And we started to do it through the voice messages people send also. So not through the nations, but through the voice messages. This always, so there are different there are different like, I don't know, different ways to really put them together in and I think that always creates a new kind of meaning and a new way of reading them. And I don't know if it like answers your question, but this is the
I see it more as a place for sort of comparison of value instead of a place for categories per se. And that to me is really rich. That's something, food for thought for myself, actually, basically.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying something, actually.
No, it's fine. I mean, there's just this one thing that it's also very nice, like in experimenting, like with doing a virtual, like a VR installation with it, because we presented the first prototype just now, like at Doc Leipzig. And it's very interesting because like these are like, I really feel like more like a guy who's doing a video, right? So you're having your Unity environment there, yeah? You try to compose stuff. You always have to jump into the classes and see how it feels. And then, of course, you have those people with their statements, but then you start to decontextualize them, right? putting together with another context and becomes something completely different. And you always have to check in between. So it becomes really like like a montage, and you're doing the really frame by frame, and trying out, right? It's really hands-on trying out. It's very hard to like to think before what you're doing. You have to feel it somehow. And that's very interesting for me, like this working process, which is really tiring and really exhausting, but it's a really interesting way of like really always experience it in space.
Yeah, also, I think as a material, even though it's in the virtual, materials, I never quite ontologically understand them very clearly, but materiality of point clouds is a great, terrible generalization here, but a great democratizing material, you know, point clouds. I can totally imagine, just because that's where I'm coming from with the questions, totally imagine people not being able to recognize Wes Anderson's set on expressed as point clouds, and then it being added to the same plethora of scans that that have a sort of their own internal logic of maybe they do, maybe they don't, of valuation and comparison. Anyway, I think yeah.
Personal archive. Oh, relating to that, because like, of course, it's not maybe the idea of like the bedroom is not as an archive is the wrong way to think about it, but it's kind of an archive of personal artifacts of sorts, right? Like, so you kind of place your much needed, the things that make you the most happy or whatever in your living space. So that kind of becomes your haven. So it is a sort of collection. If you, okay, I'm guessing about collections, it's obvious, but like it is somehow a collecting exercise as well, right? Things that are the most dear to you, things that you need the most, or whatever to exist within a space. And then all of a sudden, for those to be constructed by little points that are like somehow, they don't have the idea of semantics by the single entity, but the way they're compiled together or collected at certain areas and like kind of posited, that's also a very poetic point of view, I think, in that specific medium, although it depends who does it the slowest or whatever. There's this kind of selection.
But they also lose and gain something by being placed next to each other.
Happy accidents.
So like being next to a space that they weren't before, and to an audience like that is worldwide. So like everyone sees something different in it.
And I think it's quite relevant still because you can like have that kind of, like you see the collection of their everyday artifacts basically. Yeah, so it's quite, it is very strong in that sense of like relating to that again with the collection kind of.
What I actually also wanted to ask, like, how do they relate to each other in terms of space?
Oh yeah, that's
are they laid out or are they?
I mean, they are intersecting. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that in that specific first prototype we did, we just really tried to relate them through the voice messages. So not through like, so the spaces correspond, like there's no like, we didn't categorize it through the nations or anything, but just through like relationships in the voice messages. So there's a clear separation between the space they send us and the voice message, and then also how we construct the space. So this is also then for us a little bit of a moment of uncertainty, which ones are coming together, right? So it's really, it's not in a visual way composing it, but more in a, what are the voice messages? What are the meanings? What kind of narrative can we construct out of the different voice messages? Some of them are very short, some of them much more like, longer and more like engaged with telling us a story or telling us about their political situation, stuff like that. So we basically really, so that like that's completely like merged through the voice messages and not through the visual aspects. So this was for us then also a nice way. Of course, in the end, you adjust it a little bit, and this has to go a bit like there, and this a bit like there. But it was interesting for us to what kind of also visual connections we can create through not start with the visual thing, but going to the voice messages and start to construct the space from there.
Definitely very powerful.
I will ask if there is any last question. I mean, I'm the opinion that the good, it's shorter, it's 2 times good. So
you have to do this more times. That's why you're saying that. No,
somewhere else from the audience? Okay. So I feel that a good point here to leave it, if all of us agree. If not, the speakers have also the last chance to ask each other something or say something.
I mean, I think we had a nice discussion. Let's leave it at this. And
for sure, we'll continue talking next time we meet or see each other.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully soon.
Oh, I definitely want to thank you guys for organizing it. Put in that bit of formality there, but I really mean it. This is amazing. I was so happy I ditched work really early to get in here. This is good stuff.
Cool. I mean, this is actually the purpose of these talks, actually, that the conversations don't finish here, but actually is just to know each other a little bit more, and then meeting on the corridor and say, hey, go for having lunch together and keep on talking about we lived open. And this bloody guy is simply cut off. So thanks for everyone for attending. Thanks a lot for the lovely discussions, questions, and projects, amazing work. And see you. The next one is on December the 9th, our technology and practice session. So till then, stay safe, and we have here also. Bye.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Organizing, and Uwe and Cenk, as always, awesome.
It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. It was super nice.
Good evening. And
yeah, you too. Cheers to you guys.
Yeah.
Ciao.
Oh, bye.